Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Always fun to be back.
This time we're taking a look at Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
A classic.
Definitely a book that's sparked a lot of debate,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
which makes it perfect for a deep dive.
Love it.
Now, for our listeners who haven't read it yet, Kiyosaki basically shares his experience growing up with two father figures,
Right, two dads,
his biological father
who he calls his poor dad,
and his friend's father,
the rich dad.
and how their totally different views on money shaped his whole perspective.
It's a really interesting way to frame the book.
It is, because he doesn't just tell their stories side by side.
Yeah, he uses their words, their actual quotes, to kind of highlight the contrast in their thinking.
Like the famous one from his poor dad.
The love of money is the root of all evil.
Right, and then his rich dad counters with.
The lack of money is the root of all evil.
And that's what makes you stop and think.
Makes you question everything.
Yeah, like, wait a minute. Have I been looking at this whole money thing wrong my whole life?
Exactly. And that's Kiyosaki's point. He wants you to think for yourself, to question what you've been taught about money.
And not just what you learned from your parents, but also what you learned in school.
Oh, yeah. He's very critical of the traditional education system when it comes to financial literacy.
Because, let's be honest, when was the last time your high school math class taught you how to budget or invest?
Or even explain what cash flow really means.
It's like we're taught to get good grades to get a good job, but then what?
You're thrown into the real world with no real financial skills.
And that's why so many people, even those with fancy degrees, end up struggling financially.
Doctors, lawyers, and accountants, you'd think they'd have it figured out.
But they're often stuck in what Kiyosaki calls the rat race.
It's a powerful analogy.
It really is. Because it's not just about earning a certain amount of money.
It's about that cycle you get trapped in.
Work harder, earn more, get taxed more, spend more.
Always chasing that next paycheck.
But never really getting ahead.
Like running on a treadmill.
Lots of effort, but going nowhere fast.
And one of the big traps Kiyosaki points out is this idea of your house as your primary asset.
Ah, yes, the whole owning a home is the American dream thing.
Which for a lot of people ends up being more of a financial burden than a true asset.
And this is where some people get really defensive, because owning a home is seen as like the ultimate sign of success.
But Kiyosaki flips that on its head.
He says, sure, your house might increase in value over time.
But it's also costing you money every single month.
Mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance, all of that.
So while it might appreciate, it's also a liability.
Taking money out of your pocket.
Which brings us to one of the core principles of the book. Assets versus liabilities.
This is the part that I think everyone can understand.
It's so simple, but so powerful.
Kiyosaki breaks it down like this. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out.
It's all about the cash flow.
And he even uses those really simple diagrams in the book to illustrate this.
The arrow showing the direction of the money.
Yeah, making it super clear what's helping you build wealth and what's draining your resources.
And he gives examples beyond just stocks and real estate.
Like that fancy new car versus a rental property.
One's a depreciating liability, the other's a potential income-generating asset.
This is where our listeners can start putting this into practice.
Yeah, this week, why not make a list of everything you own?
Everything.
And try categorizing them as either an asset or a liability.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
It can be a real eye-opener to see where your money is really going.
Now, of course, Kiyosaki isn't saying never buy a car or don't own a home.
Right. It's about understanding the difference.
And consciously building a portfolio that generates more income than it costs you.
It's all about shifting your focus.
From working for money to having your money work for you.
Which leads us to another key idea from Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Mind your own business.
Which often gets misinterpreted.
People think he's saying everyone needs to become an entrepreneur.
Quit your job, start a company.
But it's more nuanced than that.
It's about taking control of your financial future.
Creating income streams that don't rely solely on a paycheck.
It could be investing in rental properties.
Starting a side hustle.
Or even just learning a new skill you can monetize.
It's about building assets that work for you even when you're sleeping.
Which brings us to one of Kiyosaki's most bold claims.
The one that always gets people talking.
The rich don't work for money.
Now, obviously, everyone works in some capacity, even the wealthy.
Of course.
But he's talking about a mindset shift.
It's about leverage.
Using money to make more money.
Building systems that generate income without your constant involvement.
Like he says, the rich focus on building assets while the average person is stuck trading their time for money.
Which is where financial intelligence comes in.
It's not just about how much you earn.
It's about how you manage it, keep it, and make it work for you.
Kiyosaki even uses the example of corporate tax advantages,
How corporations can spend money before paying taxes.
something employees can't do,
It's about understanding the rules of the game,
and playing it strategically.
not just working harder within a system that might not be designed to benefit you.
He's basically saying, don't just work in the system, work on the system.
Powerful stuff.
But putting this into practice, that's where the real challenge comes in,
Absolutely, because it often requires facing some internal obstacles.
like fear.
Yeah, fear of failure, fear of the unknown.
Kiyosaki addresses this head-on in the book.
He tells the story of Mrs. Martin.
This hard-working store owner who's always struggling financially.
Despite putting in long hours.
And he uses her story to illustrate how fear and the comfort of a regular paycheck can hold us back from building real wealth.
It's easier to stay in a job, you know,
Even if it's not fulfilling or financially rewarding,
than to step outside your comfort zone.
and pursue something that could potentially change your life,
And that's where Kiyosaki's pay yourself first principle comes in.
which can be tough to swallow when you're already feeling strapped for cash.
But he's adamant about it,
He says set aside a portion of your income for investing
even if it's a small amount.
as a way to force yourself to find other ways to generate income.
It's like tricking your brain into becoming more resourceful.
If you're automatically allocating money towards your asset column, you're more likely to start looking for opportunities to make that money work for you.
It's about building that financial discipline and prioritizing your own financial well-being.
And that ties into another key takeaway from the book: spotting opportunities and taking action.
You can have all the financial knowledge in the world.
But if you're not willing to act on it,
It's meaningless.
and I love how Kiyosaki illustrates this with the story about his childhood comic book library.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
He and his friend Mike essentially create a small business,
Out of their passion for comic books.
renting them out to their classmates and generating income while they were at school.
It's such a simple but brilliant example.
Of how we often miss opportunities because we're too focused on finding that safe path.
Rather than using our minds to create value and generate income from existing resources.
Kiyosaki is all about challenging those conventional ideas of what it means to work and earn money.
He wants us to see that there are multiple paths to financial freedom,
And it often starts with a shift in perspective.
which is why he emphasizes the importance of developing financial intelligence.
So what exactly does that mean? Is it just about being good at math or understanding the stock market?
It's more than that. Kiyosaki breaks it down into 4 key skills: accounting, investing, understanding markets, and the law.
So you're saying it's not enough to just be a good saver or a savvy investor?
Right. You need a more holistic understanding of how money works.
How to read financial statements, analyze markets, even use the legal system to your advantage.
It's about being financially literate, not just hoping for the best or relying on outdated advice.
And he stresses that this is a lifelong learning process.
Absolutely. It's not something you learn once and you're done. You need to be constantly reading, attending seminars, talking to experts, staying ahead of the curve.
It's like a muscle, you need to keep exercising it.
Exactly.
But even with all the knowledge and skills, there's one thing that often trips people up.
Fear of failure.
And Kiyosaki doesn't sugarcoat this. He talks about embracing failure, even celebrating it as a necessary part of the journey.
He uses that great Texan analogy, remember the Alamo.
It's not about letting setbacks define you.
It's about using them as fuel to become a winner,
Shifting your mindset from "I can't" to "I will learn from this and try again."
which is so important because so many people are paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes.
And he encourages readers to ask themselves, what's the worst that could happen? And then create a plan to mitigate those risks.
It's about taking calculated risks, not reckless ones.
He challenges you to overcome that chicken little mentality
The voice in your head that says the sky is falling.
and instead focus on finding solutions and seeing possibilities.
Which leads to a surprising element of Kiyosaki's philosophy.
The emphasis on giving.
Even when you're not feeling financially abundant yourself,
He talks about tithing, giving a portion of your income to charity or a cause you believe in, even if you're on a tight budget.
it might seem counterintuitive.
But he ties it to this principle of abundance.
The idea that when you give freely, it often comes back to you in unexpected ways.
It might sound a bit woo-woo to some,
But I think there's something to be said for shifting your mindset from scarcity to generosity.
it's about acknowledging that there's enough to go around.
And that contributing to something bigger than yourself can actually create a sense of abundance and attract positive energy into your life.
So it's not just about taking.
It's about giving back and creating a cycle of prosperity.
Understanding that wealth isn't just about money.
It's about mindset values and your contribution to the world.
It's a holistic view of wealth.
One that encompasses not just financial abundance, but also a sense of purpose and fulfillment.
And that's a great segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Where we'll explore Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant.
A fascinating concept that challenges conventional ideas about how we earn income and build wealth.
I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. It's one of the most thought-provoking parts of the book.
Definitely.
So stay tuned, everyone, for part 2 of our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
We'll be right back. All right, so we're back and ready to dive into one of the most, I guess you could say, controversial parts of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, definitely a section that gets people talking.
It's the cash flow quadrant.
Which sounds kind of intimidating.
It can be if you're not familiar with it.
So let's break it down for our listeners who maybe haven't encountered this concept before.
Okay, so basically, Kiyosaki uses this quadrant to categorize people.
Not by how much money they make.
But by the source of their income.
And he argues that each quadrant represents a different mindset.
A different way of thinking about money and wealth.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on us. What are these quadrants?
All right, so he uses the letters E, S, B, and I.
ESBI.
Yeah, it stands for employee.
Makes sense. Someone working for someone else, trading their time for a paycheck.
Exactly. Then you have S for self-employed or small business owner.
So like freelancers, consultants, people who are their own boss.
Right. But they're often still very involved in the day-to-day operations of their business.
Their income is still directly tied to the hours they put in.
Exactly. Now, this is where it gets interesting because we have B for business owner.
But isn't S kind of the same thing?
Not according to Kiyosaki. He makes a clear distinction between the S and the B.
Okay, I'm listening.
The B quadrant person has created a system that generates income even without their constant involvement.
Ah, so they've built a business that can essentially run itself.
Think franchise owners, investors, people who've created a model that works even when they're not actively working in the business.
They've got that leverage.
Exactly. And finally, we have I for investor.
Where your money is making money for you.
Through stocks, real estate, or other investments.
So basically, Kiyosaki is saying the goal is to move from the E and S quadrants.
Where your income is dependent on your time and effort.
Towards the B and I quadrants.
Where you have more control and potentially more passive income.
Makes sense. And he uses that great analogy of the pipeline to illustrate this, right?
The story of Ed and Bill, I love that one.
Remind us how it goes.
So you have these two guys, Ed and Bill, who are hired to bring water to a village.
Okay.
Ed immediately grabs his buckets and starts hauling water back and forth, working really hard.
Makes sense. He's got a job to do.
But Bill, he kind of disappears for a while.
People are probably wondering what he's up to.
Right, but then he comes back with this plan to build a pipeline.
Ah, so he's thinking long term.
He's thinking about creating a system.
While Ed is focused on the immediate task at hand.
Exactly. And Kiyosaki uses this to show how different mindsets approach wealth creation.
Ed is working hard, no doubt.
But he's limited by his own physical effort.
He can only carry so many buckets of water at a time.
Bill, on the other hand, is creating something that will ultimately deliver more water more efficiently and without his constant labor.
He's building that pipeline.
Which will eventually generate a consistent flow of water to the village.
So it's not about being lazy.
No, it's about working smarter, not just harder.
And thinking long term.
Exactly.
But shifting quadrants, that's easier said than done right.
It can be,
Yeah.
especially if you've always been in that employee or self-employed mindset.
It can be intimidating to even think about building a business or investing.
And that's why Kiyosaki emphasizes the importance of things like financial intelligence.
Surrounding yourself with the right mentors.
And managing risk wisely.
He even talks about studying financial heroes like Warren Buffett.
It's like finding role models who've already achieved what you're aiming for.
So instead of just saying, I want to be rich, you start analyzing, how did Warren Buffett build his wealth?
What strategies did he use? What can I learn from his journey?
It's about modeling success, not just wishing for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Kiyosaki is also very clear that knowledge without action is useless.
You have to be willing to take calculated risks.
Test your ideas and even embrace failure as part of the learning process.
He even had that phrase, face your I don't wants.
Yeah, like people who say, I don't want to deal with tenants when considering real estate investing.
Or I don't want to learn about the stock market.
He's saying those I don't wants are often just excuses disguised as legitimate reasons for inaction.
It's about digging deeper and asking yourself, what am I really afraid of? And is that fear truly valid? Or is it holding me back from achieving my goals?
It's about recognizing those limiting beliefs and challenging them.
Because most people stay financially stuck because they're too comfortable in their comfort zones.
They're afraid to take that leap of faith, even if it could lead to greater freedom and abundance.
Kiyosaki even uses the example of Colonel Sanders facing over 1,000 rejections before his fried chicken recipe took off.
It's about persistence, resilience, and believing in your vision.
And it also ties into something else Kiyosaki emphasizes, developing your financial vocabulary.
He's not just saying learn all the fancy terms.
Right. It's about understanding the language of money.
So you can make informed decisions.
So many people feel intimidated by financial jargon,
So they avoid it altogether.
which ultimately limits their options.
Kiyosaki wants you to be able to read a financial statement, understand different investment strategies, and even feel comfortable discussing money with professionals.
It's about taking control of your finances, not just blindly trusting advisors or hoping for the best.
And this proactive approach extends to everything he discusses, from investing to starting a business.
He wants you to be the driver of your financial life, not a passive passenger.
And this brings us to a point that's often debated.
Kiyosaki's views on taxes.
Oh yeah, he's definitely not afraid to ruffle some feathers there.
He's very outspoken about his belief that the wealthy use the tax system to their advantage.
Legally minimizing their tax burden.
And this can be a bit controversial.
Especially for those who believe everyone should pay their fair share.
But to be clear, we're not endorsing any illegal tax avoidance schemes.
Absolutely not. It's about understanding the rules and playing within the system.
Just like Kiyosaki advocates for in other areas of finance.
Right, he's not saying don't pay taxes.
He's saying, understand how taxes work, explore legal strategies to minimize your tax burden, and don't leave money on the table just because you're not informed.
It's about taking control of your finances, even in areas that might seem complex or intimidating.
And I think that's one of the key takeaways from Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
It's a book that challenges you to think differently about money.
To question the status quo and explore alternative paths to achieving your financial goals.
It's about becoming financially literate, not just hoping for the best or relying on outdated advice.
And even with all of the strategies and techniques he shares, there's something even more fundamental that Kiyosaki keeps coming back to,
What's
the power of belief.
yes, the mindset.
He argues that your beliefs about money, about yourself, and about what's possible ultimately shape your financial outcomes.
He's a firm believer in that idea that your thoughts create your reality.
If you constantly tell yourself, I'll never be rich, or investing is too risky, you're essentially creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
You're putting up roadblocks to your own success.
And he challenges you to examine those limiting beliefs, those I can't or I'll never, statements that might be holding you back.
It's about adopting a more empowering mindset.
One that embraces possibility and sees opportunities where others see obstacles.
It's about believing in your ability to create wealth, to manage money effectively, and to build the financial future you desire.
And this is where I think the spiritual aspect of Kiyosaki's philosophy comes in.
He's not just talking about the mechanics of money.
Right. He's talking about aligning your energy, your intentions, and your actions with a vision of abundance.
He even talks about aligning yourself with a higher power or a guiding force in your financial journey.
And he's not necessarily advocating for any specific religion or belief system.
It's more about recognizing that there's something bigger than just us striving for wealth.
It's about tapping into a source of wisdom and guidance that can support us on our journey.
He encourages you to cultivate a sense of faith.
Believing in your ability to achieve your financial goals, even when faced with challenges.
Trusting the process, keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking action.
And this ties into his concept of giving, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. He's not just talking about accumulating wealth for yourself.
It's about circulating that abundance.
Contributing to something bigger than just your own personal gain.
He encourages readers to give freely, whether it's money, time, or knowledge, without expecting anything in return.
He even suggests that this act of giving can actually attract more abundance into your life.
Creating a cycle of generosity and prosperity?
It's a beautiful concept, and it challenges that traditional view of money as a finite resource that needs to be hoarded and protected.
Kiyosaki is saying there's enough to go around.
And that by giving back, you're not only helping others, but you're also creating a more prosperous and abundant world for everyone.
It's about shifting your mindset from scarcity to abundance, recognizing that you're part of a larger ecosystem of interconnectedness.
And while this abundance mindset might seem a bit woo-woo to some, I think it's an important piece of the puzzle.
especially when you consider Kiyosaki's overall message.
It's the underlying belief system that informs his financial strategies and empowers his readers to create lasting wealth and fulfillment.
Yeah, it's not just about getting rich. It's about living a life of purpose, meaning, and contribution,
And that brings us to something Kiyosaki hints at, but doesn't fully explore in the book.
which I think is a great jumping off point for further discussion.
What's that?
It's the idea of financial freedom as a means to a greater end.
He touches upon the idea that it's not just about accumulating wealth for its own sake.
Right, it's about using that wealth to create a life of purpose and fulfillment.
He talks about supporting causes you care about, making a positive impact on the world, and living a life that's aligned with your values.
He even suggests that true wealth is not measured by your net worth, but by your ability to live a life of freedom, purpose, and contribution.
It's about asking yourself, what will I do with my financial freedom once I achieve it?
How will I use my resources to create a life of meaning, to leave a legacy that extends beyond my own material possessions?
It's a question that takes us beyond the realm of personal finance and into the deeper waters of meaning, purpose, and contribution.
And I think it's a question worth pondering, especially as we navigate this complex world of wealth creation and financial literacy.
Because ultimately, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not just a book about money.
It's a book about mindset, about possibilities, and about aligning your beliefs with your actions to create the life you desire.
And on that note of aligning your beliefs with your actions, there's one aspect of Rich Dad, Poor Dad that we haven't touched upon yet.
But I think it's crucial for understanding the book's lasting impact.
I'm intrigued. What are we diving into now?
It's something that might seem a bit philosophical or even spiritual, but I believe it's the foundation upon which Kiyosaki's entire financial philosophy rests.
Okay, you've got my attention. I'm ready.
It's the concept of abundance. Kiyosaki doesn't just talk about accumulating wealth. He talks about cultivating an abundance mindset.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's not just focused on the material stuff, right?
Right. He's talking about the underlying beliefs and attitudes.
The stuff that shapes how we see money and our financial reality.
Exactly. And he suggests that this abundance mindset, it's essential.
For attracting wealth and opportunities.
Right. It's not just about the how-to steps with money.
It's the how to think about money part.
He challenges us to move past that fear-based thinking,
It's that scarcity mentality.
that there's not enough to go around,
Like a limited pie everyone's fighting over.
and instead embrace a more expansive view of prosperity,
Seeing the world as a place full of possibility.
where there are tons of opportunities
If wealth is out there.
for anyone willing to learn the rules and play strategically,
Right. And he also talks about shifting our focus.
from what we lack to what we already have,
Cultivating gratitude for the good stuff we've got.
the resources and opportunities that are already present.
That's a big one.
He suggests that when you approach life with this abundance mindset,
You're more likely to attract positive experiences.
yeah, connect with the right people.
Seize opportunities others might miss.
It's like shifting your internal frequency.
To align with a reality of greater prosperity.
I like that.
Hmm.
And this abundance mindset, it even shows up in his philosophy of giving, doesn't it?
Totally. It's like he believes in generosity.
Not as some trick to get rich,
Not a manipulation.
but as an expression of that abundance.
And a way to circulate wealth.
So he encourages readers to give freely,
Whether it's money time or sharing what you know,
without any expectation of getting something back.
just give.
And he suggests that this giving actually creates this ripple effect.
Bringing more abundance into your life.
It's powerful stuff.
It challenges that old view of money as this scarce thing you gotta hoard.
Kiyosaki's saying there's enough to go around.
And by giving, you're not just helping others.
You're contributing to a more prosperous world for everyone.
It's that shift from scarcity to abundance again.
Recognizing we're all part of this bigger ecosystem.
We're all connected.
And I know this abundance mindset, it might sound a little out there to some people,
Yeah, some folks might roll their eyes.
but I think it's a key piece for understanding what Kiyosaki's really saying.
It underpins everything else.
It informs the financial strategies
Yeah.
and empowers people to create lasting wealth.
Not just financial wealth, but fulfillment too.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's not just about money.
It's about mindset possibilities and taking action.
It's about embracing an abundance mentality.
Not just with your bank account, but in all areas of life.
I think that's a fantastic takeaway for our listeners.
I agree. It's a powerful idea.
But I'm curious to get your take on something Kiyosaki doesn't really address directly.
Oh, I love a good thought experiment. Fire away.
Well, he's big on financial education, right? Challenging the traditional ways of thinking.
Huge advocate for that.
What do you think he'd say about the state of financial literacy today?
especially among young people.
That's a great question. I think she'd probably be pretty disappointed.
Oh, yeah, for sure, given how passionate he is about empowering young folks to take control of the money,
I bet he'd be appalled by the amount of student loan debt.
especially for degrees that don't even lead to good jobs,
He might even say the education system is setting them up for financial struggles.
instead of setting them up for success.
He'd probably advocate for completely changing the curriculum,
Adding in practical skills like budgeting and investing.
teaching kids about debt early on,
He might even say financial literacy should be a core subject.
just as important as math and science.
I can hear him saying, why are we teaching algebra when kids don't know how to balance a checkbook?
I think he'd also be a big proponent of financial literacy starting at home,
Parents talking openly and honestly about money with their kids.
giving them allowances and teaching them how to manage it.
Building those good habits early on.
It's about empowering that next generation to be financially savvy,
Make smart decisions and avoid the mistakes so many adults make.
creating a future where financial freedom isn't just for the privileged few.
But a real possibility for everyone.
That's a vision worth striving for.
Absolutely. And while Rich Dad Poor Dad might not have all the answers,
It definitely sparks important conversations.
it makes you rethink your whole relationship with money.
It encourages us to be proactive, learn as much as we can, and embrace that abundance mindset.
Not just for our own benefit, but for a better world, too.
Well said. And on that note of empowerment and abundance,
It's time to wrap up this deep dive.
into Rich Dad Poor Dad. We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe even a little challenging.
We want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
As you continue on your financial journey,
Ask yourself, what will I do with my financial freedom once I achieve it?
how will you use your resources to make a positive impact?
To leave a legacy that goes beyond material possessions.
It's a question that goes beyond just money.
It's about meaning, purpose, and contribution,
It's a reminder that true wealth is not just about what you have.
but about who you become and what you give back.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring.